So what is delegating and how do you avoid screwing it up? As an entrepreneur, as an intrapreneur, even as running your own personal life, we will always run into this thing, this concept, this idea called delegating. And luckily there's a business framework called the 9 triangles that has 2 that have delegating within it. Do, delegate, delete, or communicate, iterate, delegate. And so we are going to go unpack what it means to delegate first so you don't mess it up, and how these triangles interweave with delegating for your personal efficiency, for your roles within a company, or your roles growing a company. So Dennis, what is delegating in its purest definition and in an action item?
Delegating is when you have a task that you want someone else to do, and you are letting them know that they are responsible for getting that particular task done. Now, a lot of people think that just being a boss means you issue an order and other people get it done, and if they don't get it done or they do it wrong, then it's their fault. But that's where new managers, new team leads go wrong, and we want to show you what the most common problems are and structurally what it means to work in a team where you have other people that you're counting on to get things done.
So there's 2 levels of being on a team, and it's not only within the company level. So most people think that with being in a team or building a team that, well, a lot of people never make it to building a team, first and foremost. But then secondly, that once they do, that delegation is just throwing things to the wayside. Hey, do this, maybe without training, maybe without the right communication, maybe without the right iterations of how to do things, or because they don't want to do it or whatever it might be. And so that's within the company. Those are some common errors and some pitfalls. But then there's also the other side of with clients, with delegating the things that actually need to be done, either in their business or your business for success, or you're just customers in general. Even if you have an e-com store or something, there is a micro delegation that's happening where the customer has to do something. So even customers delegate and vice versa. So how would you explain how delegating interweaves between those 3 roles?
So first off, the difference between a digital CEO, which is what we're talking about here, and a freelancer, consultant, or contractor is a digital CEO always is working in teams of people instead of just by themselves. And you can make a great living just by yourself doing the work, and maybe you say, I tried hiring someone to do it, but they didn't do it right, and it was just better if I did it myself because it would have been faster because, going round and round with these other people. And that's what we see commonly in first-time delegators, is that they give it to somebody and they say that person would just never do it as good as me, and they have an E-myth kind of issue. Now, when you're delegating, you can delegate to someone who is at the same level, like a client, or potentially above. You could be delegating to your boss, asking for a rescue because you don't know how to do something and you're crying out for help. That's still delegation. And you can delegate to someone who's a subordinate, someone who's on your team, maybe a freelancer, someone on Fiverr, or a virtual assistant. So let's think about what the difference is when you have someone who's at the same level, which is usually a client if you have a true partnership, someone who's above you, such as a boss, if you're an entrepreneur, right? And we all have bosses. Even if you're an entrepreneur, you run a business, you have bosses because whoever's paying you money is a boss. And you have people that you're paying money to, employees and contractors. Now, let's start with the easiest one. When it's someone that works for you, you need to have, of course, a clear scope. And that's when we talk about smart, specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and time-based. And most managers or team leads or anyone who is asking for someone else to get work done isn't clear on exactly what the task has to be in order to be successful. And you need to have training behind it. You can't make assumptions around it. You need to have a clear due date, and you need to have a person, one person, who's responsible for getting that task done. Most managers don't know how to be specific at that level because they'll send out a note and they'll copy 3 or 4 people saying, this one thing needs to get done. And of course, nothing happens because everyone thinks, well, someone else is going to do it because there's not a direct person assigned. There needs to be one person who is responsible for that particular task.
And so we should clarify that the only person who is allowed to delegate is somebody who has done the thing already because they know how it should be done, what the finished product should look like, and how to communicate to help that person through the process if they need it, like they need a rescue. So when we talk about creating a task, or we talk about sending something to a teammate or employee or a client, it's not a one sentence, hey, handle this. It is essentially one of our other triangles, metrics, analysis, and action, of saying, this is the goal that we're chasing after, this is the metric, this is our analysis of how or what needs to be done, and this is the exact action that when this is completed, that we will say that this was successful.
Yep. Now let's think about how these three triangles stack on top of each other. And so this is level 1, 2, and 3, which is the first 3 levels of the 9-level system, which corresponds to the 9 triangles. And this is critical for you to master as a digital CEO. Because if you're missing level 1 and you try to skip to level 2, you're going to find things don't work. Because all of these things build upon each other. Level 2 builds into level 3. Let's talk about level 1 first. Do, delegate, delete. That's your personal efficiency. And for you to be able to manage yourself, your tasks, your communication, you have to have a single inbox. That means funneling everything through into Basecamp or your email or a post-it note, but you need to be able to be on top of your own communication, because if you're not, and you're trying to manage other people, and you're missing communication, and you're not on top of where all the other things are, then you're going to be a lousy manager.
And the simple fact is, if you have unread text messages, if you have unread emails, if you have unread notifications in your project manager, whatever it may be, then you are performing at a suboptimal level. You are not the greatest asset to your team. And we understand that it can get heavy really quickly. And so what we try to strive for, and what every single person should be doing as a digital CEO, entrepreneur, or otherwise, should be striving for inbox zero on a daily basis. Because the most successful people are the most hyper responsive. And the reason why they're able to do that is because their personal life is so well managed, do, delegate, delete, that they don't get pulled to the wayside from a random Facebook message, Instagram message, Twitter message, personal email, and then their work project management system or emails. And so at the do, delegate, delete level, you have 2 options in your primary inbox, and we use email. It's either archived, deleted, or you just responded and boomeranged it to yourself.
So everything you want to handle once. That's the power of do, delegate, delete. Most people are so inefficient that they live on the endorphins that come from notifications, because of social media notifications, because someone comes and interrupts them. They like interruptions, because a new email pops up and they love opening that new email like a Christmas present, right? They love the surprise. And thus at the end of the day, they feel like they're productive when really they've just been responding to things that are urgent instead of working on things that are important. They're not able to prioritize. So do, delegate, delete is about making sure you are able to manage your task list, not real time, because being quick on communication doesn't mean you're constantly replying to random things that are constantly interrupting you, that are keeping you off track. But having a few times per day where you make sure you're on top of your communication, that's kind of like looking out across the landscape, seeing where everything is, and then prioritizing what the important things are. And so you have to balance all of that. That's do, delegate, delete, where you're on top of your communication. What you're going to find with subordinates, and even sometimes with clients or partners, is that if they didn't do something, or if they ignored an important message, they'll say that they were too busy. And the irony is that communication is for when other people are too busy. It's for when there are problems, right? So when you communicate, that, like, your communication is going to be even stronger when there are problems and there's misunderstanding. So personal efficiency in terms of what you are doing is based on do, delegate, delete. That's level 1.
And you can tell when someone is struggling, when someone is worried, when someone is not capable at the moment, when someone is overwhelmed, the second that this first level fails. So when you're not getting messages back, when you're not getting replies in emails, you know that that person is pulled out, distracted, either not committed or not competent at the thing that they need to do at the moment, or not confident at the thing that they need to do at the moment, because it's not clear. And so when you are delegating something down, someone who might not have do, delegate, delete in order in their own inbox might go silent. And
Yeah.
if that happens, that is a sure sign that they are overwhelmed or that they are not committed.
Yeah.
And you need, in your own team, as an entrepreneur, or any other level that you're at, you need people who, no matter what, are going to ask questions, are going to communicate, are going to take these action items and deal with them once.
So let's talk about how we troubleshoot from level 1 to level 2. Level 2 is you working in a team of people. That means you're coordinating on top of other people's tasks. So if you're a team lead, you're in charge of a project, by definition, you're a team lead. You're in charge of a client, by definition, you're level 2, communicate, iterate, delegate. Now, do delegate, delete, which is the worker level. You making sure you're on top of communication, things are going well, is the iteration piece that sits inside communicate, iterate, delegate, right? So doing the work. Most tasks should be 15 or 20 minutes. Sometimes there's tasks that are going to be an hour, but the reason why you want to have tasks that are shorter is that you're not going to have something go on for a whole week where later they say, oh, well, I was spending a whole week working on this one thing, and then they were working on the wrong thing, or they were slacking off until the last day and build you a whole week of time. You need to kind of assume that's what's going to happen, because if people who are juniors, not that they're trying to cheat you, but if they don't understand what they're doing, most people won't say anything, but they're going to continue to bill. And they will later maybe even be so overwhelmed that they will quit on you, or they'll complain and go around and complain to all these other people and sow bad seeds. And it then creates an issue, because then they're going to be mad at you, or then you have to deal with the staff morale issue. And they'll even tell you, which is weird, and you'll learn as you have more team members, they'll say that they were too busy and they have too many things on their plate. And the reason why there's a lot of things on their plate is because they're frozen and they have the deer in the headlights issue. So let's talk about iteration, which is you getting the work done, or having to rescue often, and communicate and delegate. Okay, so if we see that iteration, like doing the task itself, whether it's a rescue or it's a task that's more senior where you have to do it because you don't have training on it, or it's just something you need to do because you have those relationships, or it's core to what your company's doing that you haven't delegated it out yet. Communication, how long does that take to be able to communicate with somebody?
Seconds.
So there really is no excuse, if you're running a project or a team, to not be able to communicate, to be able to ask people how they're doing, to be able to give them a frequent lightweight touch, to be able to show a client that you care. And so the communication is there as a heartbeat to make sure that the heart is always beating, that the patient is alive, that things are going okay, right? It doesn't mean being a nag, but it does mean that you are watching for where there are lapses in communication, because a lapse in communication usually means that there isn't anything happening either, okay? No communication usually means that nothing is happening either.
No iteration.
Right. So communication, iteration, if we don't see iteration, maybe you track it inside Basecamp or whatever your project management system is, then you're going to look at delegation. Delegation is when you come in and say, hey, how is that one thing that was due on Friday, right? Today's Monday. We're now 3 days late, right? And then they'll make excuses, and you have to learn how to be able to deal with the excuses. And we won't go through the most common excuses, but we actually have a flow chart that shows if they say this and you say that. And it's kind of funny, because if you're an employee, you could play this game so that if you could, play either side. It's like playing, Connect Four.
Exactly. And so for now, right now we're on this entrepreneur side of, as an owner, as somebody who's responsible for the team, somebody who's responsible for success and failure. But let's look at these two triangles from the employee perspective as well, because you had the amazing experience of being an employee in very large organizations like Yahoo, like American Airlines, right? And so what was it like, say, using these triangles now, if you think of it, as an employee, because you knew that you were responsible for communicating at a certain level, say do delegate, delete. You had to be in control of your own personal inbox. Otherwise, you were a liability to the company, not an asset. And on both companies. And when it came to that next level, communicate, iterate, delegate, when you had team members, when you had other engineers, you had to instantly level up your productivity, and that was only possible by having your personal life in order. So what does that look like as an employee, or somebody who's just now starting off as this digital CEO working from home?
When I first started at Yahoo, that was over 20 years ago, I started off just me as a contractor, meaning it was my professional services. I think I was billing $125 an hour, which was pretty good. I'm thinking, well, I'm making $250,000 a year working on the analytics at Yahoo and building databases across all the things that people were searching on, the search logs, the different properties like mail, sports, finance, personals, classified, horoscope. All these different groups needed analytics. But I wasn't able to do the analytics for all these properties because I came in initially as just me. So I did good work. I started with Yahoo Personals, which me and 2 other engineers actually built from nothing, and then learned the data model, learned how to pull the search logs, and I quickly became overwhelmed because as an internal employee, so I was an entrepreneur, I was running an agency inside Yahoo, if you can imagine what that's like, where my clients are the other property owners, because Yahoo is a conglomerate, a directory of lots and lots of businesses that sit under one domain. And what I realized was I've got to do delegate or delete. I have to basically say, no, Tina Flammer, who was the VP in charge of personals, I can't do that because I just don't have enough time, and here's the projects that I have and how they're organized, and you're going to have to go to the CTO of Yahoo if you want to override the priorities that I have, because these are the 3 things I'm working on this week, and these other 2 are critical to Yahoo because of acquisition, because of whatever, and your thing, this is all the time I can give you, right? Unless you can go to Dan Rosenzweig, the COO, and let me hire somebody, right? If you really want it, hire somebody, right? And that's where delegate comes in. Delegate is getting someone else to do the work. And there's a reason why delegate is in the first 2 triangles twice. Do, delegate, delete, communicate, iterate, delegate. So I grew inside Yahoo by doing good work myself, documenting how I did weekly reports, basically a TPS report if you see Office Space. And I started hiring more people. I started hiring unemployed friends. Pretty soon, I had 12 engineers that were from Stanford and Berkeley and other places, and I had them running reports. I had them modifying scripts that I wrote on how to aggregate log file data so we could time adjust them based on the time zones that they're in and the different ways we're analyzing how inventory is being served and what our click-through rates are and what the average CPMs are in class 2, class 3 inventory that is sold and not sold that we allocate to the different properties, and all these different kinds of canned reports. And the cool thing was, because I built a process on how to do this, I could then teach other people to be able to do it for small business, for travel, for shopping, for classifieds, for Yahoo Mail. You can imagine the same kinds of reports that these folks are running their business. So Yahoo Personals would run their business by saying, here's how much traffic we got from Yahoo Search. Here's how many people created a new profile. Here's how many people signed up for Yahoo Personals at $30 a month on the monthly plan. Here's how many people churned out. Here's how many people sent a message. Like some guy sent a message to a girl and, she replies or she doesn't reply. So we had all of these metrics, and the same metrics are true across pretty much every business because you're looking at traffic and you're looking at revenue. And I learned the hard way as a manager because I thought, man, this stuff is so complicated. I'm just going to hoard it all to myself. And this code that I've written is so complex that there's because initially I'm coming in as a contractor, it's just me. So I'm going to intentionally build all these walls around the code and the complexity. I'm not going to document the code that I have. Heck no, because then they could look at it and fire me. But then I realized, wait a minute, I trust the other people that I'm working with. And I know that if I do a really good job, they're going to give me more money. They're going to give me more responsibility. So I have to become a trainer. I have to figure out how to, this is a weird thing as a manager, you have to be able to do this. How do I remove myself? So whenever I'm working in any kind of situation, I want to work myself out of a job so that other people can do what I'm doing because I'm documenting it, I'm delegating, I'm creating systems around it, and then I'm able to manage these other people to the result. It's not enough to document what you're doing. It's not enough just to delegate it out. You have to still be accountable to the result. So if you think about the RACI model, and you should study the training on RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. If you're delegating, by definition, you're the A. You're the accountable. The buck stops with you. You own the project. There's no excuses. No matter what happens, you are the owner of the project. There's only one owner in a project. There cannot be 2 owners because then there's no owners. So if there's one owner of a project and it happens to be you because it's your butt on the line It's your P&L, it's your client, or you have, this particular project you're in charge of. You work for someone else, but you have this set of projects and other people have their sets of projects. You are a mini CEO. You're a digital CEO in charge of those particular components. And think about all the other things that you are dependent upon. So a dependency is when someone else has to do something for you. A client has to give you access. A team member has to edit a video. Someone's got to build a landing page. Someone else needs to do something for you. Most first-time team leads, project managers, whoever, they fail because they're not on top of their own inbox and their organization. They fail at level 1 because they have so much trouble just keeping on top of their own stuff. The minute you have 5 other team members that are involved, whether it's team members on your side or on the client side, maybe there's 3 or 4 other people that are involved on the client side. If you can't even manage a couple relationships and all of a sudden you're at 8 relationships, you're going to fail. And I see this happen all the time for people in digital marketing, especially because they get overwhelmed with the amount of skill necessary in the different functions to understand PPC and SEO and analytics and video editing and all these tools. Think about what your favorite tool is. And a lot of people run for the comfort of a particular tool that they know really well. But if you want to be a digital CEO, you have to be able to manage at the business level, which means you're managing other people that are doing those particular specialties. And let's say that your specialty is account management. You're good at analysis, you're good at talking to clients, but you don't know anything about video editing, you don't know anything about PPC, then you need to know enough about these different areas that you can then manage these other people. Otherwise, you're delegating to someone who could fool you. It's like bringing your car to a mechanic and he tells you, I need to replace the engine and all this kind of stuff, and is jacking up all these things that you don't really need. So you have to be a practitioner first.
Exactly. So in order for you to delegate or delete, in order to delegate anything, you must have done it. So it starts with do. And you can't really just pass something off to somebody else because you can't communicate or iterate how to do it when you properly delegate. So if you're at level 1 and you don't know how to do something, your default is not just to pass to the person next to you, pass to the other man. Could you imagine if every basketball player only passed the entire game? Someone has to take the shot. And so when you don't know who that person is, it's up to you to reach out and ask your coach, ask your owner, if you're an entrepreneur, what do I need to do? What training do we have on this? Where is the best shot for me on this so I can learn it and attempt to do it as well? And who else has already done this before that I can learn from? So it starts with doing before you can delegate anything out. And that is, in our own growth, one of the major failures that we've seen across pretty much our whole organization is that when you start to grow faster and faster and hire more people, say they're virtual assistants, or you have partners, team partners as an entrepreneur, then as your company grows, there becomes more and more communication about work than actual work being executed. And so the only way to prevent that is to follow one of the other triangles, which is learn, do, teach, meaning that unless something has been done multiple times and is templated or it's been done enough to where it can be taught by a senior expert, then it cannot be turned into a task or a deadline or something that needs to be done. And so at level 1, do, delegate, delete. If you are not managing your personal inbox, meaning inbox 0 at least, we'll say every 2 days in case you're in a fast-paced environment, because ours can get pretty hectic, a couple hundred notifications in a day. So inbox 0 every other day by then. And making sure you're staying up to the nearest training so that way you can do or delegate properly. And then thirdly, to actually be able to delete things, they must be finished. And when we say delete, it's more like archiving, putting them in storage. It is not just going to your threads and pressing delete on the inbox. It's going and archiving threads, tasks, whatever they may be. And so that should cover level 1. So level 2, again, with communicate, iterate, delegate. Delegating is passing it to the junior person or side person that you know. You've iterated exactly what needs to be done and communicated exactly what needs to be done. then what are the common pitfalls, I guess you would say, of communicate, iterate, delegate that cause people to think they're at a team management level, but they're really not, or they're not ready for it yet because they've never either handled level 1 or they've never done the level 2 task?
Yeah, a lot of people think that managing is easy and that you're not doing the work, you're just telling other people what to do. And they make the common mistakes because they can't clearly define what has to happen. That often is because they've never done it themselves, and now they're trying to teach. The idea of learn, do, teach is the same as communicate, iterate, delegate. Delegate and teach are the same thing, because if you're the one delegating it and that person you're delegating to has a problem, they're stuck, they don't know how to do it, who are they going to go to?
They should be coming to you.
To the person who did the delegation. Right?
Exactly.
So if you're a team lead, you have to be senior to the people that are on your team. I'm sorry, there is just no excuse around this, especially in the world of digital marketing. You have managers that are not on top of their own communication. Now, what happens if, let's say, Tristan's in trouble, and I'm the senior person when it comes to analytics, and he comes to me for help, but I take 2 days or 3 days to respond. And let's say it's urgent, and I miss it, right? Now, if my cycles are 2 days apart, and maybe it takes 2 cycles for me to reply, we're 4 days in, when that much time goes by, your probability of solving a problem goes down because you lose your momentum. That's like trying to help someone who had a heart attack 8 hours after their heart attack versus within the first 15 minutes.
Right.
The odds of survival change significantly. And so good managers have to actually be able to spin the communication wheel 4 or 5 times faster than junior people. Most junior people, believe it or not, are sending out 10 to 15 messages per day. Per day, that's it. That's like 1 or 2 messages per hour. How many messages would you say you send per day across all channels?
For me, per day?
Yeah.
Well over 120.
Yeah.
If I'm counting emails, Facebook messages, Instagram, because I haven't been able to even consolidate. Most people don't know that I'm using primarily email now, so they're coming to me from every angle, and then including our project management system and sending updates there. I'd say we're sending 100 messages.
I'm probably
a day,
600 per day. And I've consistently been at about 600 per day for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason why I can do that is not because I'm working 20 hours per day. It's because I know that as a manager, it's communicate, iterate, delegate. How long does it take to communicate?
Seconds.
Iteration. I don't do that many tasks, but I do the ones that will be repeatable, so that when I do it, it turns into training, right? And that honors, learn, do, teach. Delegate. How long should it take to delegate something?
Because you're including the either instructions or specifications, no more than 5 minutes to write up the requirements. And
or even a minute. Because if it's a canned task, you can refer to that task, and there's training already associated with that task. So another common mistake with managers who really mean well is they personally mentor one-on-one, and they do personal training task by task, so that even though there might be a training system, the people on their team know that they can skip all of it because they can have a call directly with Tristan one-on-one for private consulting. And who wouldn't want that? That's fantastic, right? But you might feel like, well, then I'm not really helping people, or I feel like I'm too important. No. When they can go through the training, then the power of the time you spend together with them is more powerful, because now you're able to troubleshoot with them instead of having to spoon feed them the basics and being responsible for everything that they know. So if the people on your team are solely dependent upon you for learning, they don't have a natural curiosity, then you're going to be in trouble, because you're going to be spending more time training and managing them than the actual work being done, and you're going to be so busy doing that you're not able to manage the business, not able to manage the clients, and it's going to slow down the RPMs that you have. So if your communication and your delegation are fast, you should be able to do a few hundred of these every day. And that way you're always on top of the pulse of what's going on without needing to be a micromanager. You're managing your time effectively because you're not constantly being distracted every 30 seconds by people who are text messaging you, and knowing that you're going to respond right away to everything being urgent. Even if it's not important, you're going to skip the most important things, and you're going to fail. And this is something I see all the time, where people try to overcome it by working harder. Working harder only gets you into more trouble because it opens up more threads, and it causes the other people that you work with, whether it's clients or teammates, to expect that you are instantly on call available anytime. The more you set the expectation that you are always available, the more they're going to use that, and they're going to disrespect your time because they assume it's like, oh, it doesn't really matter. I'm not really doing anything. It's just this one quick thing I need to ask Tristan, and I know he's super helpful. So it doesn't mean you're not available. It means that you are available a few times per day when you have to train your team and your clients to understand if it requires 911 where they need to pull you out of whatever you're doing, or it's so urgent it can't wait until you'll respond by the end of the day, then go ahead and call me while I'm in a webinar. Go ahead and call me while I'm in another client call. Go ahead and call me, text me, Facebook message me, whatever it is, when I'm in the middle of a project where I'm trying to focus on something where I really need to concentrate. And if I break my concentration, it might take me an hour to get back to where I am, right? So you want to train your team to know that they can ask for help. But if they do, you have to be reliable in your own communication, because if it takes you 2 or 3 days to get back to them, that's no good. It should take you, ideally, no more than a day, but normally, 4 hours to 8 hours. So no more than a business day. Weekends we don't expect. And, when you're chasing teammates, it'll be 4 days later and they still haven't replied, and maybe you're catching up on Sundays. That's something I like to do, right? Some people don't work on Sundays. That's fine, whatever your preference is. But they'll say, hey, I don't work on Sundays. Yes, but I sent you that message on Wednesday, right? And now I'm just trying to play catch up. So you could have answered on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. Like, oh, no, the weekends are my family time. You can't expect me to work in the evenings or on the weekends. No, we're not expecting you to do that, right? So make sure you set those clear expectations on communication, which is good for their efficiency and good for your efficiency.
And the same thing applies as an entrepreneur as well, because you have a role. You have your own job to complete as a number 2, a number 3, maybe even a number 100 within a growing organization. With level 1 and level 2, you're going to have coworkers, you're going to have teammates that you are effectively side by side with, but really you have your own lane and job to complete. And so you don't want to get pulled to the water cooler to talk about the weekend, or pulled over to help somebody constantly when you guys have access to the same training, or they have the same manager that person could then evaluate. And oftentimes what we see when 2 people are at the same level, they'll start to hop on their own calls, they'll start to hop in their own meetings, they'll start to jump in the own work as 2 equal level employees to try to work it out, instead of following the process or going and asking the actual manager who would be able to evaluate that process. And so if you're at the same level with other teammates and employees, unless you've been explicitly directed to communicate about how to complete a task from an upper level manager, from somebody who's delegated this down, then it is best to follow your chain of command. And there's a book called Extreme Ownership that we reference, we send to a lot of clients, called in Extreme Ownership, there's a principle called decentralized command. And that basically means that at each level of the chain, not only is racing applied, as Dennis mentioned, but there is a specific person responsible for that thing and knowing only that thing and nothing more and nothing less to be able to pass up and down. And so oftentimes that person is actually a group of people, say a squad or say anything else. And so your video editing team does not need to know, if you're an entrepreneur and owns a digital agency like us, your video editing team does not need to know how to structure a database. They need to know how to edit and manage and properly execute videos. Your campaign and Facebook advertising team does not need to know exactly how to do PDF designs and checklists, right? So when you are evaluating this as an entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur in your current experience or the work you've already done, you want to be able to look at what is distracting me from either doing or deleting, because delegating should only be for the people who have done something multiple times and you now have someone equal or junior to you. And in most companies that are starting at the ground up, that person does not exist. So if you're at a new organization or you're starting your own business by yourself, or maybe you have one virtual assistant, or wherever you are in your journey, you're not going to have the blessing of delegating properly. So we want to make sure that you're not messing it up once you get it. Because most people, it takes a very long time to unlock that key, to have a team or have people that you can delegate things to. It takes a long time to build a team.
working in a team is a lot tougher than you might think. We see so many people fall down because even if they were productive as a freelancer, as one person who's working with individual clients and one-on-one relationships, they could scale to 3 clients, 4 clients, 5 clients. But the minute you have a team where you have 1 or 2 people that work for you, it could be even tasks that you buy on Fancy Hands or Fiverr, not even a VA, not even someone who works in an office. It could be multiple people that work in a client. You have several failures that typically kill projects and kill project managers. And I'm speaking from experience. I've seen this thousands of times. Ruin careers. One is too many meetings, because people love to hop on Skype and Zoom and have meetings, and meetings tend to take an hour. Even if they could have been an informational email that you sent. Meetings should happen only to make decisions that require real-time interaction between several people to come to a decision. Meetings should be called only by people who own a project, the A, right? Because they're responsible for getting the result. If you are a team lead, if you are managing a client, if you own an agency, by definition, you're the A. The buck stops with you, and you need to organize all communication and iteration and delegation for the achievement of the business result. By default, the other people on the team are going to add themselves to threads that they're not involved in any sort of way. Like Tristan said, these video editors are going to add themselves to operational queues that have nothing to do, these support queues have nothing to do with what they're doing. And you'll explain till you're blue in the face what RACI is, yet they'll still do that. I've seen threads that have 23 team members on it when there's only one person who's actually doing any of the work, right? And I'm like, why are these other people adding themselves to these particular threads? So you need to watch out for people adding themselves to other threads, because it makes them feel like they're productive, but they're not productive. And if you're the A, if you're in charge of the project, whose job is it to make sure that we're productive and not wasting resources?
Of course.
It's yours. So the meeting thing, the over-communication thing is one side of the spectrum. The other side is not enough communication. And you'll hear other people say, oh, but you're so busy, I didn't want to say anything. So I was just going to wait until you came to me and played needle in the haystack and 20 questions to figure out that we have a problem on the client, right? Like, I can't be asking you and monitoring you and seeing what's going on. Or other people will say, literally, someone said to us last week, well, I continue to bill you week after week after week because I didn't understand what was going on, but I also didn't want to bother you because you're busy, so I was just going to bill you another $6,000, right? That doesn't make any sense. But people will tell you that. And if you're responsible versus you're accountable, then you need to know the difference there. If you're in charge of delivering project success, you need to be able to spot issues before they happen, and usually it's with people. So your people management skills are absolutely critical here. You have to understand RACI.
Exactly.
You have to understand task management. You have to be on top of your stuff and on top of other people's stuff, and you have to be able to be a disciplinarian and a cheerleader and a mentor and a coach and a teacher. You have to be able to wear all those different hats, and that's what makes working in teams so difficult, because it's by default, you're going to be swept away in a bunch of urgent, unimportant things that are interesting, and people are going to shoot the bull with you on Skype, talking about their weekend and what kind of guitar song they're playing or what have you, and you have to be polite, but you also have to keep your eye on the ball.
Exactly. And so in order to get your people management skills up, you've got to get your personal management skills up. So again, we'll circle back to the overall overarching idea, which is what is delegating and how not to screw it up. Well, first, you need to be able to manage yourself. Okay, so that's the level 1. And 2, you need to be able to work within a team. And that's within an organization as an entrepreneur, or to want to build your own as an entrepreneur. And this is going to make you a more effective employer or a more effective employee, whichever side of the spectrum that your goals are at. As of right now, regardless, you're a digital CEO. You're in those roles regardless, because we know at the time of this recording, for example, that most of the world is still working from home. And even as we move forward, more and more people will work from home on their own. As an Uber driver, you're your own digital CEO. I used to drive Uber and have my computer in the center console and work in between rides, and do video editing and do tasks and ads for clients as I was trying to grow and get off the ground. And so in today's episode of Digital CEO, we wanted to clarify that piece so that way you don't go and start growing and implode because you don't know how to delegate or build a team around you or follow the right principles, or worse, you never grow because you never learned how to manage your own personal inbox. And for whatever reason, if you just believe and you just manifest or dream, you think that it will happen. And the only way that you're going to be able to get to where you can build a team is to have a process. The only way you're going to be able to get a process is if you're managing your personal efficiency. The only way you become more efficient is to document what you do and turn it into a process that can then be delegated later. There's only one way, we think, to measure the true success of a company, and that is the impact it has on its employees and by default the world. So the more employees that you're able to have are the bigger teams, and teams that you're able to either work with, or have work within your own company is the true measure of success. And so this is a people business. This is a people opportunity. As a digital CEO, although you're behind the computer, we don't want to confuse it for a lonely laptop lifestyle. It actually is working with more people than you would have traditionally in an office. And because of that, you want to become more personally aware and available yourself by being more efficient. And so I think that really nails down delegating. We've covered a lot of stories. We've covered a lot of pieces in there. Do you think that there's any final thoughts on delegating and be able to wrap this up?
Understand, like Tristan said, that being a digital CEO means you're actually managing a people business. And when I started an agency 20 years ago, actually 30 years ago, because I did it when I was in college, I thought, I'm just building websites and building programs, and I'm an introvert, so I don't have to talk to these other people. You actually have to be more people intensive because digital requires more touches. There's a higher expectation. Things move faster. Everything's measurable. And as you grow and you hire more people, and not to say that you want to build an empire, but this is something we can't cover here, but in later sessions we will. You're going to have enough people. Once you pass about 16 to 20 people, you're going to have managers of managers, right? Because if you have 5 managers and each manager has 5 people, you've got 25 people in that organization. And then once you get to 26, 27, you have to hire a manager of managers. And then, I know some people who have gotten to 100 people or 200 people in the organization. Like Brennan Agronoff has 200 plus people in his organization, and he doesn't know the names of every one of them. He can't say hi to every one of them. He can't be personally involved in their lives. And if the scale of your business and where you want to go requires, even with maximum efficiency, maximum software, requires more people than 15 or 20, you're going to have to learn how to manage managers. That means you have to be able to not only be an effective manager yourself, but in managing managers, it's an extra layer of politics, because if one of the line level people is misbehaving, then you have to be able to reach through that manager to another manager, potentially to another person down the chain, 3 levels. And if those people are struggling and they're not communicating and something's going wrong and one of your managers is covering up that issue, you have to have systems in place to be able to determine when other things aren't working. We're going to cover this in another triangle when we talk about content checklist software, when you're starting to use systems and processes to help you diagnose when you have other issues. Today we've covered 2 of the 9 triangles. There are other ones, and you can learn more about them at the9triangles.com. As a digital CEO, you need to wear many hats. So think about where you might naturally not be as strong. Or maybe you don't have the management experience and you haven't hired and fired hundreds of people like I have. Look at what those other areas are so that you can be a balanced digital CEO and thus be prepared for any situation that happens in your business.
And so the action item for today's episode is to get to inbox 0. If you're one of those people with 15,000 emails, go ahead and start clicking that select all inbox and archiving, because you can always search what's important. Getting your messages down to 0. That's 0 unread messages. That's on every single channel. And that does not mean opening and leaving unread. I'll get back to it later. That means responding, which is actually doing the activity itself. Archiving, which is putting it away.
Usually reading something.
Usually just reading and archiving or acknowledging. or physically actually deleting, unsubscribing, removing yourself from that distraction, whatever it may be, or closing out that project, whatever it may be.
Or delegating to someone else to have them do it because you have a checklist around it, because it's something that you've done before that you can credibly supervise.
And so that is your action item for today's episode. Is get to Inbox Zero and let us know what that was like to finally know that everything has been addressed and been handled. This has been another episode of Digital CEO. We look forward to your feedback on hitting Inbox Zero, and we'll see you in episode 3.